Hello, welcome to Technology and Learning Case Study number 1. This is over Sarah, and Sarah is a college senior with documented dyslexia. She expressed to you her anxiety about successfully completing your Lit 460 class, the capstone course in her major of literary criticism and the most rigorous course in the entire program. Sarah's accommodation are in the form of two major technological aids. One, in a written work can be assisted with computerized technology that proofreads, spell checks, and reads aloud text on screen. Number two, any reading must be available on audio and through voice output system. You have three major assignments in this capstone class: reading two novels and writing a paper critique of the novels in a final oral exam. Sarah has submits her paper flawlessly. Obviously, the technological assistance has enabled her to read the novels and write papers that reflect solid understanding and comprehensive of both literary critique methods and the novel study. Sarah is extremely quiet in class discussions. You decide not to call on Sarah directly because of a conversation in your office where she stated how anxious she was about the class because has performed so well on the papers. You do not want to add her to her anxiety, so her ability to interact spontaneously and verbally in class discussion has been minimal. In the final oral exam, Sarah is unable to give you basic information about the novel and can respond very little to your inquiry and feedback about her critiques of the novels in the two papers she submitted. Based on the final exam experience, you began to wonder whether it is Sarah's anxiety, the accessibility aids, or the aptitude, or perhaps a mixture of all three, that will be appropriately evaluated when you assign the final grade for the course. The goals for our group: number one, identify how technology may have positively and negatively impacted Sarah's learning. Number two, identify best options for the faculty member to address a scenario that can uphold the educational standards of the course, does not disadvantage other students, nor limit Sarah's potential. Number three, identify barriers, obstacles for implement options. And number four, three final recommendations. Here's what each person: Alan, myself, is the leader. Tess is humanitarian, exploring fairness and advocating for the student. Addison is the devil's advocate, addresses issue with recommendations, yes, but. Addison is also the techno guru. Kenny is the manager, examining issues related to the institution, faculty, and academics. Kenny is also a composer. To begin with, we'll start with humanitarian and look at fairness. Tess, humanitarian.
Thanks, Alan. Okay, first, as humanitarian, we need to explore all possibilities or fair ways to assess Sarah's knowledge with maintaining our awareness that she has a documented disability. We are providing her equal access and accommodations in other assignments. Sarah could say we are discriminating against her in the final assignment due to her disability. When examining fairness, we must look at legal issues and policies. It is illegal to discriminate based on a disability according to the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Amendment Act of 2008. We have to give her reasonable accommodations. Often, individuals diagnosed with dyslexia may have trouble memorizing and summarizing, both part of the oral presentation. This oral presentation is not fair to Sarah because we are not providing her with appropriate accommodations for this assessment, and she is at a disadvantage compared to other students who may not have this barrier. Her anxiety is a disability-related impairment, thus appropriate accommodations should be made. As far as Sarah's anxiety, many times anxiety will hinder a student's ability to articulate content. Anxiety affects confidence, which many students living with a learning disability struggle with. When someone lacks confidence, they may forget facts. This is true for all students. And no, we can't let all students have different standards because they are anxious about an assignment. However, in this case, Sarah is anxious as a result of her disability, and we have to address her learning in a way that is fair for her to have the same opportunity as the other students, and to support her doing her best. So we know from the background that Alan gave that the faculty member has never called on Sarah directly, and she has not had the same opportunity as others to verbally discuss the content. Her assistive aids have not prohibited her comprehension. Spell check and proofreading would affect the content, but not her comprehension. Even with assisted technology, it will take extra effort for her to learn the material. Sarah would be most disadvantaged if she is not allowed accommodations for her final assignment. To write a paper, you must comprehend the information. Her assistive technologies have only helped with hearing the material and with proofreading and spell check. Audio text wouldn't affect her either. It would benefit her comprehension. Remember that her only accommodations were any written work can be assisted with a computerized technology that proofreads, spell checks, and reads aloud text on screen. And two, any readings must also be on audio or through voice output system. This would not affect her ability to critique the actual literary content. So the assistant aides have not helped her actually write the papers.
Recommendation number 1, writing us another paper. Humanitarian?
So for our first recommendation, we were looking at her just writing another paper. So from the humanitarian's viewpoint, this option is fair because it allows her to keep her accommodation. We cannot assess her with something new and offer her no accommodations. It is assumed that Sarah has always had these accommodations with other assessments and other courses, and this is probably her first time giving an oral presentation. Again, we are assuming she needs no accommodations for oral presentation as the other students, and this is discrimination. We should allow her to be continued to be assessed through written assignments.
Techno Guru? The Techno Guru? Next.
Okay, as the Techno Guru, I think this option would require no additional technology for either Sarah or the faculty member. So there'd be no additional costs or no additional training time. And as the devil's advocate, I think the purpose of an oral exam is to measure comprehension differently than a paper. So how can the faculty member be sure that Sarah actually wrote the first 2 papers? So the other students would need to be offered the choice to write a 3rd paper as well. So this and they'd have at least one other paper to read. So another paper to read and grade. So an oral exam could be completed in only minutes, whereas grading another paper or several papers may take much longer.
Well, after weighing both the managers and the devil's advocate and the techno guru role, we need to look at which option is going to satisfy both the faculty handbook and the student handbook of this particular university. There is no justification that writing an additional paper will shed any additional light on the student's aptitude to convey the subject matter. This option is inconvenient for the faculty member as well. According to most university faculty handbooks, there are accommodations that can and will be made for students with disabilities according to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disability Amendment Act of 2008. Assigning another paper will not guarantee good assessments, but to be in alignment with the Office of Student Disabilities, there will be an accommodation made, but this would not be the appropriate accommodation for this scenario.
Our second recommendation is a narrated PowerPoint. Humanitarian?
Thank you. Okay, so for the narrated PowerPoint, from the humanitarian perspective, this option would allow Sarah to utilize some of her assistive technologies while also verbalizing her knowledge. She could also, when writing her thoughts and content in the PowerPoint, she can use her proofreading and spell checking to enhance her thought organization.
Now the Techno Guru.
Well, there is somewhat of a learning curve associated with composing a narrative PowerPoint. This can take up to a day to learn and up to a week to master. So Sarah may also need to purchase a PowerPoint license or a microphone. And so we don't know if her assistive technology is compatible with PowerPoint. So she may actually have to copy and paste some of the text from her assistive program into PowerPoint. And as the devil's advocate, there is no way to guarantee that Sarah won't reference the literature while doing this assignment. So this doesn't assess her recollection of the material. So this actually may prove to be an unfair advantage for the other students.
Manager.
Again, referring to the faculty handbook and then the student handbook, there must be reasonable accommodations made in reference to Section 504. Reasonable to accommodate a student's ability to perform in a classroom, but not to give a student a student with a disability an unfair advantage over students who do not possess a disability. Most handbooks, whether it's faculty or students, offer services for students with disabilities. Some of those services include exam accommodations, alternative method media, American Sign Language interpretation, assistive technology, note-taking and laboratory assistance, disability counseling and advocacy, and any emergency procedures that student may find themselves in. This recommendation may be perceived as biased to other students in the classroom who do not have a disability. Furthermore, this may cause an unforeseen handicap for the instructor because they're already having problems and difficulty assessing Sarah's availability to understand this content. So this recommendation would not be a viable option either.
Our third recommendation is listen and record. Humanitarian.
And finally, for the third recommendation from the humanitarian perspective, this option seems to address her anxiety and also allows her to be assessed fairly as the other students. It allows her to listen several times to the question and privacy to collect her thoughts and ease her anxiety. She can also make notes and record them in real time, which is a reasonable accommodation for Sarah.
Techno Guru and Devil's Advocate.
Well, as the Techno Guru, I think the professor would need to check out a pair of digital audio recorders from the library, preferably with a built-in speaker for playback. This may require an external speaker or headphones for audio playback if there isn't one built in. It's fairly straightforward, simple operation. None of Sarah's assistive technology applies in this case. The professor would just record the oral exam questions onto one recorder, and then Sarah could listen to each question and record responses on the other. As the devil's advocate, I really don't have much opposition to this point. Sarah could complete this during class, and I mean, she'd need to be isolated in an empty classroom, office, hallway, something like that. And she couldn't have any of her resources available to her. There are no books, notes, electronics, anything like that. It all need to be left in the classroom.
Manager's view.
Because it has been discussed that Sarah has anxiety and her instructor already has diagnosed and discussed this with her, working outside the classroom has already been an accommodation that Sarah has been afforded. Also in the faculty handbook, it talks about how for exam accommodations, students are given more time if they have that particular disability, and that's what has been described by the Offices of Disability Services. Sarah can take the exam in this manner, and it would not pose any additional hardship because this is something she's already been afforded. If the instructor has any reservations about Sarah bringing in auxiliary materials, the exam can be proctored by someone that Sarah trusts and is comfortable with while she proceeds to take the exam in an oral and recorded fashion. This accommodation proves to be amenable to both the student handbook and the faculty handbook.
In conclusion, we have decided on number 1. Our first one is listen and record session, allowing more time for Sarah to process the question as well as a privacy to ease her anxiety. This allows Sarah reasonable accommodations while accessing her through an oral presentation. Also upholds the academic standards of the course. Our second option, if this one doesn't work, is recording her oral presentation and submit it versus in person. This is a way Sarah can ease her anxiety, but the faculty cannot access her knowledge. Sarah can write a script using her assistive technology as she did with her papers, but would have the question beforehand and other students would not. Another paper is number 3, replacing the final oral presentation. Sarah continues to use her accommodation and allow her to be evaluating accommodations her ability. Sarah would still be able to use all of accommodations, but not fully be assessed, evaluated on her knowledge. Intended consequences: we will be accommodating Sarah's learning and disability, offering her the same equal assessment as other students. We'll be allowing equal access to the education and not discriminating due to her disability, adhering to ADA guidelines. Allowing the access to Sarah does not hinder other students' learning, and Sarah's comprehension is evaluated. Our unintended consequences: Sarah does not learn the content. Her aides may have not prohibited her with learning the content, but may have contributed to her anxiety with speaking in public. Her comprehension isn't evaluated appropriately. A complaint is filed. Sarah is evaluated at a different level and has a disadvantage of other students. Assistive technology that Sarah uses as a barrier for comprehension and may not be as useful as we believe. That is our conclusion on case number 1 from group number 1. Thank you.